It's 3 a.m., and your house is eerily silent, the kind of quiet that feels alive. Then you hear it, a soft tap-tap-tap at your window. You tell yourself it's just a branch, but your pulse quickens. You pull back the curtain, and there's a figure, tall, gaunt, with no face, just a blank void staring back. You blink, and it's gone. But now every window, every mirror, feels like it's watching you. Welcome to The Shadow at the Window, a viral story that's been haunting readers since it hit the subreddit. This chilling tale follows Sarah, a single mom, and her son Oliver, terrorized by shadowy entities in their new suburban home. Why does this story linger, making you double-check your curtains? It's not just the scares. It's the primal fear of being watched, the fragility of safety, and a mother's desperate fight to protect her child. In this deep dive, we'll unravel the horror of Maple Crescent, a perfect neighborhood with a sinister secret. We'll explore the cryptic neighbors, Oliver's eerie drawings, and the relentless shadows that lurk in reflections. We'll share real-life stories of unseen watchers, analyze the psychological grip of this tale, and uncover what it teaches us about fear. From the Babadook to Get Out, we'll see how it fits into horror's pantheon while standing alone. So, grab a blanket, lock your doors, and hit subscribe. We're diving into a nightmare that'll keep you up all night. Let's step into The Shadow at the Window, where the shadows are closer than you think. The story opens with Sarah behind the wheel of her aging sedan, its engine humming softly as she navigates a quiet road bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Her knuckles are white, gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly, a silent testament to the weight she's carrying. In the back seat, her 5-year-old son, Oliver, sits quietly, his small hands clutching a worn stuffed bunny named Mr. Flops, its once bright fur faded from years of being his constant companion. Sarah's eyes flicker to the rearview mirror, catching Oliver's reflection. His face pale, his gaze fixed on the passing scenery, a boy who's grown quieter since the divorce that shattered their family. She forces a smile, her voice bright with a cheer she doesn't feel. "Almost there, buddy," she says. "Our new home's gonna be perfect." Oliver doesn't respond, just presses Mr. Flops closer to his chest, and Sarah's heart twinges. This move isn't just a change of address. It's her last-ditch effort to rebuild a life that's been unraveling for months. As they turn onto Maple Crescent, the neighborhood unfolds like a scene from a real estate brochure. Rows of 2-story houses line the street, their facades painted in calming shades of gray, cream, and soft blue, each one nearly identical to its neighbor. Lawns are meticulously trimmed, edged with precision, and flower beds burst with marigolds and petunias, their colors almost too vivid against the muted tones of the homes. White picket fences gleam under the sun, and every mailbox stands at the same angle, as if measured with a ruler. A few children's bikes lean against garages, their handlebar streamers fluttering gently, and a porch swing creaks lazily on a nearby house, swaying in a breeze that carries the faint scent of freshly cut grass. It's the kind of place that screams American dream, promising safety, community, and the kind of predictable routine Sarah craves after a year of chaos. Her divorce left her drained, financially, emotionally, spiritually, and Maple Crescent feels like a lifeline, a place where she can finally give Oliver the stability he deserves. Sarah pulls into the driveway of their new home, a modest 2-story with white siding, green shutters, and a small front porch that creaks under her weight as she steps out to stretch. The house is unremarkable but welcoming, its windows catching the sunlight in a way that makes them gleam like polished glass. She imagines Oliver riding his bike on these quiet streets, making friends, laughing again. But as she unbuckles Oliver from his car seat, he tugs at her sleeve, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mommy, why are the houses so close together?" He points to the neighboring homes, their walls so near that the narrow strips of grass between them seem more like afterthoughts than yards. From where they stand, the windows of the house next door feel almost within arm's reach, their curtains drawn tight despite the daylight. Sarah laughs, ruffling his hair. "It's cozy, Ollie. Means we'll have lots of neighbors to meet." But her words feel hollow, and a faint unease prickles at the back of her neck. The houses are close, too close, their proximity creating a sense of claustrophobia, as if Maple Crescent is huddling against some unseen force. Let's pause to unpack why this setting feels so inviting yet so subtly wrong. Suburbia is a cornerstone of horror, from Poltergeist to Stranger Things, because it's a symbol of order ripe for disruption. Maple Crescent's perfection is a facade, a carefully curated illusion that lulls Sarah into believing she can outrun her past. The neighborhood's uniformity, identical houses, synchronized lawns, even the eerie stillness of the streets, creates a sense of artificiality, like a movie set waiting for the cameras to roll. Psychologically, humans are drawn to predictable environments. Suburbs promise routine, community, and control, especially for someone like Sarah, whose life has been anything but stable. But as I learned in a cognitive psychology course years ago, our brains are wired to detect anomalies, a survival instinct that kicks in when something feels almost right but isn't. This is the uncanny valley, a term coined to describe the unease triggered by things that are close to familiar but slightly off. Think lifelike robots or, in this case, a neighborhood so pristine it feels like it's holding its breath. Maple Crescent embodies this unease. The house's closeness isn't just a quirk. It's the story's first red flag, a subtle hint that this place is more cage than sanctuary. The gleaming windows, the two perfect flower beds, the absence of casual life, no dog walkers, no kids playing, create a sense of sterility that clashes with the warmth Sarah expected. It's like stepping into a postcard where every detail is flawless, but the air feels wrong, heavy with an unspoken tension. Horror thrives on this contrast. The safer a place seems, the more devastating its betrayal. Maple Crescent's promise of safety is a trap, and Sarah's optimism, her desperate need to believe in it, makes her vulnerable. As viewers, we feel that dissonance too, our instincts whispering that something's off even as Sarah tries to embrace her new beginning. Now, let's talk about Sarah and Oliver, the emotional anchors of this story. Sarah is relatable in her exhaustion and hope. She's not a superhero. She's a mom pushed to her limits, carrying the guilt of a broken marriage and the fear that she's failing her son. Her forced cheer, the way she overcorrects with bright smiles and promises of a perfect life, is a shield against the chaos she's left behind. The divorce wasn't just a legal split. It was a wrecking ball, leaving her with a depleted bank account, a stack of unpaid bills, and a son who's stopped singing the silly songs he used to love. Sarah's move to Maple Crescent is an act of defiance, a refusal to let her past define her future. But her optimism is fragile, and the story uses that fragility to build tension. Every time she dismisses a strange detail, like the house's closeness or the odd stillness of the street, she's not just reassuring Oliver. She's reassuring herself, clinging to the belief that she can control this new chapter. Oliver, though, is the story's quiet pulse, a child whose silence speaks louder than words. At 5 years old, he's too young to articulate the trauma of his parents' separation, but it's etched into his behavior. His once sparkling eyes are dull, his chatter replaced by long stretches of quiet, and Mr. Flops has become more than a toy. It's a lifeline, a soft anchor in a world that's shifted under his feet. Oliver's question about the houses isn't just a cute observation. It's a spark of intuition, a child's unfiltered ability to sense what adults rationalize away. Kids often pick up on danger before grown-ups do, their minds less cluttered by the need to explain or dismiss. In horror, children like Oliver are often the canary in the coal mine, their sensitivity to the unnatural serving as a warning. Think of Danny in The Shining, whose visions signal the overlook's malevolence, or Cole in The Sixth Sense, who sees what others can't. Oliver's role is similar, his quiet watchfulness setting the stage for the horror to come. The story's opening also plants subtle clues that deepen the unease. As Sarah and Oliver step into their new home, the air inside feels stale, despite the open windows. The hardwood floors creak underfoot, and the living room's large bay window dominates the space, its glass catching the fading sunlight in a way that feels less welcoming than watchful. Sarah busies herself unpacking, arranging Oliver's toys and hanging a few photos to make the place feel like theirs. But Oliver lingers near the front door, his small frame dwarfed by the house's emptiness. "It's too quiet," he says. his voice barely audible, and Sarah brushes it off, blaming the lack of furniture for the hollow feel. Yet she can't shake the sense that the house is listening, its walls absorbing every sound, every step. The windows, in particular, draw her eye. Too many, too large, their clarity almost unnatural, as if they're designed to let something in rather than keep it out. This moment sets up the story's central motif. Windows as portals, not just to the outside world but to something else. In everyday life, windows are symbols of openness, letting in light and air, connecting us to the community beyond. But in horror, they're vulnerabilities, thin barriers between safety and the unknown. A study I read in environmental psychology noted that humans feel exposed near windows at night, a primal instinct tied to our ancestors' fear of predators lurking in the dark. Maple Crescent's windows amplify this fear, their closeness to neighboring houses creating a sense of being watched, not just by neighbors but by something less tangible. Sarah's initial comfort in the neighborhood's coziness begins to erode as she notices how the windows seem to reflect more than they should. Flickers of movement that vanish when she looks closer, shadows that don't quite align with the trees outside. The neighborhood itself adds to the creeping dread. As Sarah and Oliver take a short walk that evening, the streets are oddly empty. No joggers, no kids riding scooters, just the distant bark of a dog and the hum of a sprinkler. The houses stare back, their curtains drawn or windows dark, as if the residents are hiding from the fading light. A man in a nearby yard glances up from his gardening, his eyes lingering on Sarah and Oliver a moment too long before he returns to his work without a word. The silence feels deliberate, like a collective holding of breath, and Sarah's skin prickles with the sense of being observed. She tells herself it's just the awkwardness of being new, but Oliver's grip on her hand tightens, and she notices he's avoiding the shadows cast by the houses, stepping carefully to stay in the sunlight. This early scene is a masterclass in subtle horror. The story doesn't rush to scares. It lets the unease simmer, building through small, deliberate details. The house's closeness, the empty streets, Oliver's quiet intuition. All are brushstrokes in a portrait of a neighborhood that's too perfect to be trusted. It's reminiscent of the Stepford Wives, where a utopian community hides a sinister truth, or It Follows, where the mundane becomes a backdrop for unrelenting dread. Maple Crescent's allure is its danger. It promises everything Sarah needs, but at a cost she can't yet see. The story's pacing here is slow but purposeful, letting us feel Sarah's hope and Oliver's wariness, setting up the tension that will unravel as the shadows begin to move. Sarah and Oliver's dynamic is the emotional core of this section. Sarah's determination to make this work, her forced smiles, her quick dismissals of Oliver's concerns, reveals a woman fighting not just for a new home but for her son's happiness. She's hyper-aware of his fragility, the way he's withdrawn since the divorce, and every quiet moment feels like a failure she can't fix. Yet she's also human, her own fears bubbling beneath the surface, masked by the need to be strong. Oliver, meanwhile, is a study in understated heartbreak. His attachment to Mr. Flops, his sparse words, and his fixation on small details like the house's closeness paint a picture of a child processing trauma in ways Sarah can't fully grasp. His role as the story's early warning system is subtle but powerful, his innocence making his observations all the more chilling. As this section closes, Sarah tucks Oliver into bed in his new room, a small space with a single window that overlooks the street. She pulls the curtains shut, telling him it's to keep out the moonlight, but really it's to block the view of the neighboring house's windows, which seem to stare back like unblinking eyes. Oliver clutches Mr. Flops, his voice small but steady. "Do we have to stay here, Mommy?" he asks. Sarah kisses his forehead, promising they'll be happy, but as she turns off the light, she glances at the window, its curtains glowing faintly from the street lamp outside. For a moment, she thinks she sees a shadow move across the glass, but when she blinks, it's gone. She tells herself it's just her imagination, the stress of the move playing tricks. But deep down, a seed of doubt takes root, whispering that Maple Crescent is watching, and it's only a matter of time before it shows its true face. The sun is dipping below the horizon as Sarah and Oliver settle into their new home on Maple Crescent. the sky bleeding orange and pink across the neighborhood's eerily uniform houses. Inside their modest two-story, the air feels heavy, carrying a faint musty scent that clings to the walls despite Sarah's efforts to air out the rooms. Boxes are strewn across the hardwood floors, half unpacked, their contents spilling out like the remnants of a life Sarah's trying to piece back together. She's in the kitchen, arranging mismatched plates in a cupboard, when she notices the movers' haste. They'd arrived earlier that day, a pair of burly men in faded uniforms who worked with an odd urgency, their eyes darting toward the windows as they hauled in furniture. Now, as they finish, they're practically sprinting to their truck, barely acknowledging Sarah's thank you wave before peeling out of the driveway, tires squealing on the pavement. She frowns, brushing it off as a tight schedule, but the speed of their exit lingers in her mind like a splinter. Oliver, meanwhile, is in the living room, kneeling on the floor with his crayons scattered around him. He's unpacking his small box of treasures, dog-eared picture books, a plastic dinosaur, and Mr. Flops, his stuffed bunny, which he props carefully against a couch cushion like a sentinel. Sarah watches him from the kitchen doorway, her heart aching at his silence. The divorce has dimmed his spark, turning her once chatty boy into a shadow of himself, and every quiet moment feels like a rebuke of her parenting. "You okay, Ollie?" she calls, forcing a brightness into her voice. He nods without looking up, but his gaze drifts to the large bay window dominating the living room. The glass catches the fading sunset, casting a warm glow that should feel cozy, but instead makes the room feel exposed, like a stage under a spotlight. "Why were they scared, Mommy?" Oliver asks suddenly, his voice small but piercing. Sarah blinks, caught off guard. "Who, the movers?" "They weren't scared, buddy. Just in a hurry." But Oliver's eyes stay fixed on the window, and Sarah follows his gaze, half expecting to see something. The street outside is empty, the neighboring houses dark, their windows like closed eyes. She shakes her head, chiding herself for letting a child's question unsettle her. That evening, as the last light drains from the sky, the story's first true chill arrives. Oliver is still in the living room, coloring with a focus that borders on obsession. When he freezes, his crayon hovering over the paper. "Mommy, who's that?" he whispers, pointing to the window. Sarah steps closer, her socks silent on the hardwood, and peers through the glass. Across the street, under the sagging porch of a house identical to theirs, stands an old woman. Her faded floral dress hangs loosely on her thin frame, and her gray hair is knotted in a messy bun, strands escaping like spiderwebs. She's motionless, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes locked on Sarah and Oliver's house. There's no wave, no smile, just an unblinking stare that feels less like curiosity and more like a warning. Sarah's stomach twists, but she forces a grin for Oliver's sake. "Just a neighbor saying hello," she says, raising her hand in a tentative wave. The woman doesn't respond. Her gaze doesn't waver, and for a moment, Sarah feels pinned, like a specimen under glass. Then, abruptly, the woman turns, her movements stiff, and disappears into her house, the screen door slamming with a sharp crack that echoes down the street. Oliver clutches Mr. Flops tighter, his voice barely audible. "She didn't say hello." Sarah laughs, the sound brittle, and pulls the curtains shut, telling herself it's just the awkwardness of a new place. But her pulse races, and the woman's stare lingers in her mind, cold and heavy, like a stone sinking into deep water. This moment is horror at its most subtle and effective. The staring neighbor is a trope that works because it subverts our social expectations. In a neighborhood like Maple Crescent, where the promise of community is part of the allure, you expect warmth, a casserole, a nod, at least a cursory smile. When that's replaced by a blank, unrelenting gaze, it's jarring, like a glitch in the social contract. I remember moving into a new apartment in my early 20s and catching my neighbor across the hall peering through her blinds every time I left my place. It wasn't malicious, just nosy, but it made my skin crawl, as if I was being cataloged. In this story, the old woman's stare is more than nosy. It's predatory, a silent signal that Sarah and Oliver are already marked. The story's use of her stillness, her refusal to engage, taps into a primal fear of being watched by something that doesn't play by human rules. Sarah's attempt to wave, to normalize the moment, is her denial kicking in, a reflex to preserve the illusion of safety she's pinned her hopes on. The unease deepens the next morning as Sarah and Oliver venture out to explore Maple Crescent. The neighborhood is strangely desolate, its streets devoid of the life Sarah expected. No children play in the yards, no joggers pound the sidewalks, no retirees sip coffee on porches. The only sounds are the distant bark of a dog and the rhythmic hiss of a sprinkler, its water arcing over a lawn that's already too green. The houses loom silently, their curtains drawn or windows dark, as if the residents are hiding from the daylight. Sarah tries to make it fun, pointing out a tire swing in a nearby yard and promising Oliver they'll meet kids soon. But Oliver lags behind, his sneakers scuffing the pavement, his eyes darting to the windows they pass. "It's too quiet," he says again, echoing his words from the day before, and Sarah feels a pang of guilt. She wants to fill the silence, to drown out the growing sense that something's wrong. But her reassurances feel thin, like shouting into a void. Their walk takes them past a man in his 50s, his back hunched as he trims a hedge with mechanical precision. His flannel shirt is tucked neatly into khakis, and his face is lined with a weariness that seems older than his years. Sarah seizes the chance to connect, introducing herself and Oliver with a smile she hopes looks genuine. "We just moved in down the street," she says, gesturing vaguely. The man pauses, his shears glinting in the sunlight, and turns to face them. His smile is wide but hollow, a baring of teeth that doesn't reach his eyes, which are cold and guarded, like he's sizing them up. "Welcome to Maple Crescent," he says, his voice flat, almost rehearsed. "Let us know if you need anything." Before Sarah can respond, he turns back to his hedge, the shears snapping shut with a metallic snip, and retreats to his porch, slamming the door behind him. The sound reverberates, sharp and final, and Sarah stands frozen, her smile fading. Oliver tugs her hand, his voice a whisper. "He didn't mean it, Mommy." Sarah nods, swallowing hard, but the man's dismissal feels like a door closing, not just on their conversation but on her hopes of belonging. Further down the street, they encounter Mrs. Landry, an elderly woman leaning heavily on a cane, her white hair pulled into a tight bun that accentuates the sharp angles of her face. She's watering a row of roses, her movements slow but deliberate, and when she notices Sarah and Oliver, her eyes narrow, as if she's been expecting them. Sarah introduces herself again, her voice brighter than she feels, hoping for a warmer reception. Mrs. Landry studies them for a long moment, her gaze lingering on Oliver, who shrinks behind Sarah's leg, clutching Mr. Flops. "You're the new folks in the White House," Mrs. Landry says finally, her voice low and gravelly, like she's smoked one too many cigarettes. "Close your curtains after dark, dear. Every night, no exceptions." Sarah blinks, caught off guard by the urgency in the woman's tone. "Why?" she asks, trying to keep her voice light. "Is there a peeping Tom or something?" Mrs. Landry's lips tighten, and she shakes her head, her eyes darting to the windows of her own house, which are covered with heavy drapes. "Just do it," she mutters almost to herself. "You'll understand soon enough." She turns away, limping back to her porch, and Sarah feels a chill that has nothing to do with the morning air. As they walk away, Oliver's voice is barely audible. "She was scared, Mommy. Scared of the shadow at the window." Sarah's breath catches, but she forces a laugh, telling him it's just an old lady's quirk. But the words shadow at the window lodge in her mind, sharp and unyielding, like a shard of glass. This section is a masterclass in building dread through ambiguity. The mover's haste, the old woman's stare, the man's hollow welcome, and Mrs. Landry's cryptic warning. All are pieces of a puzzle that Sarah can't yet see. Are the neighbors hiding something? Are they victims of the same force that's beginning to encircle Sarah and Oliver? The story doesn't answer, and that's its strength. Ambiguity in horror is like a slow poison, seeping into your mind and letting your imagination do the work. It's reminiscent of The Wicker Man, where the townsfolk's polite but guarded demeanor hides a deadly secret, or Rosemary's Baby, where the neighbor's odd behavior is a clue to a larger conspiracy. Here, Maple Crescent's residents feel like a closed circle, their interactions laced with an unspoken knowledge that excludes Sarah and Oliver, amplifying their isolation. Psychologically, this plays on our fear of being outsiders. Moving to a new place is inherently vulnerable. You're a stranger, craving acceptance, but if the community feels impenetrable, it's like being locked out in the cold. Sarah's attempts to connect, her forced smiles and small talk, are acts of hope, but each rejection chips away at her confidence. I felt this myself, moving to a new city where neighbors avoided eye contact, their doors always shut. It wasn't sinister, just urban apathy, but it made me hyper-aware of my aloneness. For Sarah, the stakes are higher. She's not just seeking community. She's seeking salvation, a way to heal her son and herself. The neighbor's behavior isn't just rude. It's a betrayal of the promise Maple Crescent sold her. Oliver's role here is crucial. His quiet observations. Why were they scared? She didn't say hello. She was scared of the shadow. Are the story's first overt hints of danger. Children in horror often serve as conduits for the supernatural, their unfiltered perception cutting through adult denial. Think of Regan in The Exorcist, whose possession begins with subtle signs only she notices, or the kids in it, who see Pennywise's true form while adults look away. Oliver's not possessed, but his sensitivity to the neighborhood's wrongness makes him a beacon. His words carrying a weight Sarah can't yet acknowledge. His mention of the shadow at the window is especially chilling, a phrase that feels like it's been plucked from a nightmare. It's not just a child's imagination. It's a warning, and Sarah's dismissal of it, her need to protect him by rationalizing, sets up the heartbreaking tension that will drive the story forward. The story's use of windows continues to shine as a motif. The old woman's stare through her porch window, the drawn curtains of every house, the way Oliver avoids looking at the living room window, all reinforce the idea that windows are more than glass. They're thresholds, barriers that separate the safe from the unknown, but also invitations for something to cross over. The sunset scene, with the bay window catching the light, is particularly evocative. It should be beautiful, a moment of warmth in a new home, but instead it feels like the house is watching, its windows reflecting not just the sky but something deeper, darker. A study I came across in environmental psychology noted that humans feel vulnerable near windows at night, a holdover from our ancestral fear of predators. In Maple Crescent, that vulnerability is constant, the window's clarity and proximity making every glance a risk. The pacing here is deliberate, letting the tension build through small, cumulative moments. The mover's rush isn't a monster jumping out. It's a crack in the facade. The old woman's stare isn't a chase scene. It's a promise of something worse. Mrs. Landry's warning isn't a scream. It's a whisper that echoes long after she's gone. This slow burn approach is what makes stories so effective. They don't rely on gore or shock, but on the creeping realization that the world you thought you knew is unraveling. Maple Crescent is no longer just a neighborhood. It's a stage, and Sarah and Oliver are unwitting actors in a play whose script they can't read. As this section closes, Sarah tucks Oliver into bed, the small room lit only by a nightlight that casts soft shadows on the walls. She pulls the curtains tight, telling him it's to keep out the streetlights, but really it's to block the view of the house across the street, where the old woman stood. Oliver clutches Mr. Flops, his eyes wide in the dim light. "Do they watch us all the time?" he asks, his voice trembling. Sarah's heart lurches, but she kisses his forehead, promising no one's watching. "It's just us, Ollie," she says, but the words feel like a lie. As she leaves the room, she glances at the window, its curtains glowing faintly from the street lamp outside. For a split second, she thinks she sees a shadow flicker across the glass. A tall, thin shape that vanishes when she blinks. She tells herself it's exhaustion, the stress of the move, but her hand lingers on the light switch, reluctant to plunge the house into darkness. Outside, Maple Crescent is silent, but the silence feels alive, and Sarah can't shake the sense that something is waiting, just beyond the glass, for the right moment to make itself known. 10 to 1500 hours, Oliver's drawings. The horror takes shape. The days in Maple Crescent settle into a fragile routine, but the house on the corner of the street feels less like a home and more like a stranger Sarah and Oliver are still learning to trust. The air inside carries a faint dampness, as if the walls are holding onto secrets, and the hardwood floors creak with every step, their groans echoing in the quiet. Sarah throws herself into making the place theirs, hanging thrift store curtains, arranging Oliver's toys on a shelf, taping a family photo to the fridge, its edges curled from being packed away too long. She's trying to outrun the ghosts of her past, the divorce that left her bank account empty and her heart bruised. But the neighborhood's oddities cling to her like damp clothes. The mover's hasty exit, the old woman's unblinking stare, Mrs. Landry's cryptic warning about closing curtains. They're small thorns, pricking at her resolve to believe Maple Crescent is the fresh start she promised Oliver. Yet she pushes forward, her smiles brighter than her mood, determined to shield her 5-year-old son from the cracks in her confidence. Oliver, though, is retreating further into himself. The boy who once filled their old apartment with laughter and endless questions about dinosaurs now moves through the house like a shadow, his small frame hunched, his eyes darting to corners and windows. Mr. Flops, his stuffed bunny, is never far from his side, its patched fur a constant in his unsteady world. Sarah notices he avoids the living room's bay window after dark, scurrying past it with his head down, as if it might reach out and grab him. She tells herself it's the stress of the move, the divorce's lingering scars, but a deeper part of her, the part that wakes at 2 a.m. with a racing heart, knows it's something else. Oliver's silence isn't just grief. It's vigilance, a child's instinct sensing what adults are trained to dismiss. And it's in his drawings that this instinct begins to take shape, transforming the story's subtle unease into something sharp and undeniable. One afternoon, Sarah finds Oliver in his room, a small space with pale blue walls and a single window that overlooks the street. He's hunched over his desk, a stubby black crayon gripped tightly in his fist, scribbling with a focus that borders on trance-like. The floor around him is littered with crumpled papers, each one a chaos of dark lines and jagged shapes. Sarah kneels beside him, forcing a playful tone. "What you drawing, Ollie?" "More spaceships." But when she glances at the paper, her breath catches. The drawing isn't of rockets or dinosaurs. It's a figure, crudely rendered but chillingly vivid. The creature is tall and skeletal, its limbs stretched unnaturally long, its head bulbous and featureless, with 2 hollow ovals for eyes that seem to stare through the paper. It stands outside a window, its hands pressed against the glass, fingers splayed like spider legs. The window is drawn with meticulous detail, its frame matching the one in Oliver's room, and the figure's stillness is what makes it so unsettling. Not lunging, not moving, just watching. Sarah's skin prickles, but she swallows her unease, ruffling Oliver's hair. "That's creative, buddy. Who's this guy?" Oliver doesn't look up, his crayon scratching relentlessly. "The shadow at the window," he says, his voice flat as if stating a fact. "They live in the windows and watch us when we're not looking." Sarah's heart lurches, but she forces a laugh, the sound brittle in the quiet room. "You've got a wild imagination," she says, tucking the drawing into a drawer, out of sight but not out of mind. She tells herself it's just a phase, a child's way of processing the move, but the image lingers, those hollow eyes, that unnatural stillness. Oliver's drawings have always been his outlet, a window into his mind, but these aren't the whimsical sketches of a 5-year-old. They're warnings, raw and unfiltered, and Sarah's instinct to dismiss them wars with a growing dread that she's missing something vital. That night, as she tucks Oliver into bed, she notices he's drawn another figure, this one looming over a stick-figure boy clutching a bunny. The boy's face is a crude oval, but the fear in his posture is unmistakable. "They like me," Oliver whispers, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. "They want to see me closer." Sarah's throat tightens, but she kisses his forehead, promising nothing will hurt him. "It's just a bad dream, Ollie," she says, but her voice wavers, and as she pulls the curtains shut, she avoids looking at the window, afraid of what she might see. Let's unpack why this moment is so chilling. Children's drawings in horror are a classic device, from the Babadook's pop-up book to Hereditary's disturbing sketches, because they subvert the innocence we associate with kids. Children are supposed to draw sunny fields or smiling families, so when their art turns dark, it feels like they're tapping into something adults can't or won't see. Oliver's drawings aren't random. They're a manifestation of his fear, his intuition translating the unnatural into crayon and paper. The figure's features, elongated limbs, hollow eyes, their obsession with windows, evoke the uncanny, that psychological gray zone where something is almost human but not quite. A study I read in developmental psychology noted that children often express trauma through art, their drawings becoming a safe space to externalize what they can't articulate. For Oliver, the divorce has already fractured his world, and Maple Crescent's wrongness amplifies his anxiety, giving it form in these shadowy watchers. As a parent, Sarah's torn between protecting him and facing the possibility that his fears are real, a tension that's both heartbreaking and terrifying. The horror escalates as Oliver's fixation grows. He spends hours in his room, sketching more figures, each one darker than the last. Some show multiple shadows crowding a window, their hands overlapping like a grotesque tapestry. Others depict a single figure standing in a doorway, its head tilted as if listening. Sarah finds the drawings everywhere, tucked under his pillow, crumpled in his backpack, even taped to the inside of his closet door. She tries to redirect him, suggesting they draw animals or superheroes, but Oliver's focus is unshakable. "They're always there," he says one evening, his voice barely audible as he points to his latest sketch. A figure pressing its face against a window, the glass warping under its touch. Sarah's stomach churns, and she confiscates the drawing, promising to hang it somewhere special. But really she buries it in a box, as if hiding it could banish the fear it represents. Yet Oliver's behavior shifts further. He avoids mirrors, refuses to sit near the living room window, and starts whispering to Mr. Flops when he thinks Sarah isn't listening, as if the bunny is as confident in a secret he can't share. The house itself begins to feel complicit in the growing dread. At night, the creaks Sarah once attributed to settling would take on a rhythm, like footsteps pacing the hallway, pausing just outside her bedroom door. She checks, flashlight in hand, but finds only emptiness, the beam catching the glint of a cheap mirror on the wall, its surface reflecting nothing but her own pale face. One evening, as she's washing dishes, she hears a faint tapping from the kitchen window, a soft tap-tap-tap that could be rain but feels too deliberate. She glances up, expecting to see a branch, but the glass is clear, reflecting only the dark street beyond. Her hands tremble, and she pulls the blinds down, telling herself it's nothing, but the sound follows her into her dreams, a metronome of unease. The windows, once a symbol of the house's openness, now feel like eyes, their clarity a mockery of safety. A study on environmental psychology I came across noted that humans feel exposed near windows at night, a primal fear rooted in our vulnerability to the unknown. In Maple Crescent, that fear is a constant, the window's proximity to neighboring houses amplifying the sense of being watched, not just by neighbors but by something less tangible. The story's horror peaks in this section with a moment that cements the supernatural threat. One night, Sarah wakes to a stillness that feels wrong, the house holding its breath. She checks the clock, 2:37 a.m., and listens, her heart pounding in the silence. Then she hears it, a soft creak from the living room, followed by Oliver's voice, a whisper so faint it's almost swallowed by the dark. "They're still there." She slips out of bed, her bare feet cold on the floor, and finds Oliver standing by the living room window, his small silhouette framed by moonlight. He's clutching Mr. Flops, his eyes fixed on the house across the street, where the old woman stood days before. Sarah follows his gaze, her breath catching as she sees it. A figure in the second-story window, tall and impossibly thin, its body a jagged outline against the dim glow of a street lamp. Its face is a blur, like a smudge on glass, featureless yet somehow watchful. It doesn't move, doesn't sway, just is, its stillness more terrifying than any motion. Sarah's mind scrambles for an explanation. A neighbor, a shadow, a trick of the light, but Oliver's trembling voice cuts through her rationalizations. They never move, Mommy, he whispers. They just watch. This image is pure nightmare fuel, and it's the story's use of stillness that makes it so effective. In horror, motionlessness can be scarier than action. Think of the weeping angels in Doctor Who, frozen until you look away, or the lurking presence in Paranormal Activity. Its silence a prelude to terror. The figure's lack of a face, its smudged features, taps into our fear of the unknown, forcing us to project our worst imaginings onto its blankness. The window, too, is a genius touch. Windows are meant to connect us to the world, to let in light and air, but here they're barriers that barely hold back something malevolent. The story's pacing is relentless now, piling on small scares. The creaks, the tapping, Oliver's whispers, that build to this heart-stopping reveal. It's a moment that shifts the narrative from psychological unease to supernatural dread, confirming that Maple Crescent's shadows are real and they've chosen Sarah and Oliver as their focus. Sarah's response is quintessentially human. She grabs Oliver, pulling him away from the window and shutting the curtains with a jerk. Her hands shaking so badly, she fumbles the fabric. "It's nothing," she says, her voice sharp with panic. "Just someone in their house." But Oliver shakes his head, his eyes wide with a certainty that chills her. "They're not people," he says, and the words hang in the air, heavy and final. Sarah scoops him up, carrying him to her room and locking the door, as if a flimsy lock could keep out whatever's watching. She sits on the bed, Oliver curled against her, and listens to the house, waiting for another sound, another tap. The silence is worse, a void that feels like it's waiting to be filled. She glances at the bedroom window, its curtains drawn but glowing faintly from the streetlight outside, and for a moment, she thinks she sees a shadow flicker across the fabric. Tall, thin, motionless. She blinks, and it's gone, but her heart races, and she pulls Oliver closer, whispering promises she's not sure she can keep. This section is a turning point, where the story's horror takes shape, both literally in Oliver's drawings and figuratively in the figure at the window. It's a masterclass in psychological horror, using ambiguity to keep us guessing. Are the figures real, or are they manifestations of Sarah and Oliver's trauma? The answer doesn't matter yet. What matters is the fear, the sense that the house, the neighborhood, the very glass in the windows is turning against them. The neighbors' warnings, once dismissible, now feel like lifelines Sarah ignored, and Oliver's role as the story's canary grows clearer. His drawings, his whispers, his fear. They're not just a child's imagination. They're a scream, a plea for Sarah to see what he sees. And as viewers, we're right there with her. Our hearts pounding, our eyes darting to our own windows, wondering what's watching us in the dark. As the horror of shadow at the window takes root in Maple Crescent, the story's chilling imagery, faceless figures lurking in windows, Oliver's haunting drawings, the oppressive silence of the house, begins to feel less like fiction and more like a mirror held up to our deepest fears. Sarah and Oliver are trapped in a nightmare that's both supernatural and painfully human. Their new home a battleground where safety is an illusion and every glance at a window risks inviting something in. The story's power lies in its ability to tap into universal anxieties. The dread of being watched, the fragility of home as a sanctuary, and the gut-wrenching instinct to protect a loved one from an unseen threat. But what makes this tale truly unforgettable is how it echoes real-life experiences. Those moments when the uncanny creeps into our own lives, leaving us questioning what we saw, what we heard, what we felt. To explore this, I reached out to my audience on X, asking if anyone's ever felt watched in a new home, and the responses were as chilling as the story itself. These accounts, paired with the narrative's psychological depth, show why Bong Nuoi Ben Kwa so resonates so deeply, blurring the line between fiction and reality. Let's start with Sarah and Oliver, whose struggles anchor the story's horror. Sarah is fraying at the edges, her optimism crumbling under the weight of Maple Crescent's oddities. The mover's haste, the neighbor's cryptic warnings, and now Oliver's drawings. Each is a crack in the facade of the fresh start she envisioned. She's not just fighting to keep Oliver safe. She's fighting to keep herself together, her guilt over the divorce amplifying every moment of doubt. The drawings, with their skeletal figures and hollow eyes, are more than a child's art. They're a scream she can't ignore, a reminder that her son is seeing something she's too scared to acknowledge. Yet her denial persists, a reflex born of exhaustion and the need to be the strong parent. She busies herself with routine, cooking spaghetti, folding laundry, humming old lullabies, hoping normalcy will drown out the fear. But at night, when the house creaks and the windows glow with streetlight, she feels it. A presence, not just outside but within, watching her every move. Oliver, meanwhile, is the story's heartbeat. His quiet terror a lens for the supernatural. His drawings have become an obsession, each one darker, more detailed, showing figures crowding windows or lurking in doorways, their hands pressed against glass as if testing its strength. He stopped playing with his toys, stopped asking for stories, his world narrowing to his crayons and Mr. Flops, the bunny he whispers to when he thinks Sarah isn't listening. His behavior mirrors the hypervigilance of trauma, a state I learned about in a psychology course where the brain stays on high alert, scanning for threats. For Oliver, the divorce was the first wound, stripping away his sense of security, and Maple Crescent is pouring salt into it. His question from the previous section, "They're not people," haunts Sarah, a child's certainty that cuts through her rationalizations. When she finds him staring at the living room window one evening, his small hand gripping the curtain, he whispers, "They're waiting for us to look away." Sarah pulls him close, shutting the curtains, but her heart races, and she wonders if he's right. To understand why this story hits so hard, let's turn to real-life stories that echo its themes. On X, I posted a question. Have you ever felt watched in a new home, like something was just outside your window? The responses flooded in, each one a testament to the primal fear of the unknown. One user, at Nightle92, shared a story. They'd moved into a rural house in Ohio, a fixer-upper surrounded by empty fields, hoping for a quiet life. The first week, they noticed soft taps on their bedroom window at night, always around 1 a.m. At first, they blamed tree branches, but the nearest tree was 50 yards away, and the field was barren. They started closing the blinds, but the tapping continued, sometimes accompanied by a faint scratching, like nails on glass. One night, too frustrated to ignore it, they yanked the blinds open and saw a shadow, tall, indistinct, moving across the glass before vanishing into the dark. There was no one outside, no footprints, no explanation. It felt like the house was marked. They wrote, "We moved out a month later, and I still check my windows every night." The story sent chills down my spine, not just for its eeriness but for its parallel to Sarah and Oliver's experience. A home that should be safe becoming a stage for something sinister. Another account came from a friend, Maria, whose story mirrors Oliver's drawings in a way that's almost too close for comfort. Maria moved to a suburban neighborhood similar to Maple Crescent, all manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses, with her 6-year-old daughter, Lila. A few weeks in, Lila started drawing pictures of a tall man, standing outside their house, his body stick-thin, his face a blank oval. Maria thought it was just a phase, a creative outlet for the stress of the move, until Lila pointed to the dining room window and said, "That's where he stands." Maria humored her, checking the window, but found smudges on the glass, faint, elongated marks like handprints, too high to be Lila's and too large to be her own. She cleaned them off, heart pounding, but the next night, they were back, accompanied by a faint tapping that woke her at 3 a.m. Maria installed security cameras, but they caught nothing. No figures, no animals, just static flickering at odd hours. She never let Lila play near that window again, and though they stayed in the house, Maria still avoids looking at the glass after dark. "It's like the house remembers," she told me, her voice tight. I don't know what Lila saw, but I believe her now. These stories aren't just spooky anecdotes. They're proof that Bong Nuoi Ben Kwa so taps into something universal. The fear of being watched, especially in a place meant to be safe, is primal, rooted in our evolutionary need to guard against predators. Psychologists call it hypervigilance, a state where the brain is wired for threats, amplifying every creak, every shadow. For Sarah, the move to Maple Crescent after a traumatic divorce already puts her in this mode. Her nerves frayed by the need to protect Oliver. Oliver's own hypervigilance, expressed through his drawings, is a child's version of the same instinct. His art a cry for help that Sarah's too scared to fully heed. The story externalizes these fears into the shadowy figures, making the psychological feel supernatural, a technique that's both terrifying and brilliant. It's like the house itself is a projection of their trauma, its windows reflecting not just the outside world but the chaos within. Let's compare this to another classic, Pen Pal, to see how the shadow at the window stands out. In Pen Pal, a child's innocent interactions with a stranger escalate into a horrifying realization, much like Oliver's drawings start as art but become warnings. Both stories use children as conduits for horror, playing on our instinct to protect them while exploiting their vulnerability to the unknown. But Bong Nuoi Ben Kwa So is unique in its focus on reflections, windows, mirrors, even the glint of a faucet. These aren't just settings. They're active players in the horror, portals that blur the line between reality and something else. The story's use of glass feels like a commentary on exposure, a reminder that our homes, our lives, are never as private as we think. In a world of Ring cameras, social media, and constant connectivity, the idea of being watched, by neighbors, by strangers, by something else, hits closer to home than ever. The real-life stories also highlight the story's social horror. Maple Crescent's neighbors, with their hollow smiles and cryptic warnings, evoke the fear of being an outsider, a theme that resonates in Maria's experience. She told me her neighbors were polite but distant, their conversations clipped, their eyes always darting to her windows as if checking for something. It wasn't until Lila's drawings that Maria realized they might know more than they let on. Their silence a kind of complicity. This mirrors Sarah's growing isolation, the way the neighbors' behavior. Mrs. Landry's warning, the man's slammed door, feels like a collective secret she's not privy to. It's reminiscent of Get Out, where the community's polite facade hides a sinister truth, or the Stepford Wives, where conformity is a trap. In Maple Crescent, the neighbors aren't just bystanders. They're part of the nightmare, their silence amplifying Sarah's paranoia. Another ex-user at Shadowseeker7 shared a story that captures the story's motif of windows as portals. They lived in a city apartment with a fire escape outside their bedroom window, a feature they loved until the noises started. Every night, around midnight, they'd hear a faint tapping on the glass, irregular but persistent, like someone testing the window's strength. They checked the fire escape, expecting a loose bolt or a bird, but found nothing. No marks, no debris, just the empty metal grating. The tapping grew louder over weeks, sometimes accompanied by a shadow flickering across the glass. Too quick to be human. They started sleeping with the blinds down, but one night, they woke to the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate, just outside the window. Terrified, they called the police, who found no one but noted the window's lock was scratched, as if something had tried to pry it open. "I moved out the next month," they wrote. "I don't know what it was, but it wasn't a person. It was waiting for me to look." The parallel to Oliver's "they're waiting for us to look away" is uncanny, a reminder that the fear of unseen watchers transcends fiction. These accounts show why the shadow at the window feels so personal. It's not just about supernatural figures. It's about the vulnerability of home, the way a new place can feel like it's sizing you up. Sarah's experience mirrors this. Her house a battleground where every window is a weak point, every shadow a threat. The story's genius is how it takes these universal fears and gives them form, turning the mundane, glass, reflections, silence, into something sinister. It's a technique used in The Haunting of Hill House, where the house itself is a character, its architecture amplifying the character's fears. In Maple Crescent, the house isn't just haunted. It's complicit, its windows inviting the shadows closer with every glance. The real-life stories also underscore the story's emotional core, the bond between Sarah and Oliver. Maria's fear for Lila, her decision to install cameras and limit playtime near the window, echoes Sarah's desperate need to protect Oliver. Every drawing, every whisper, is a reminder of his fragility, A child caught in a nightmare Sarah can't control. This dynamic is what grounds the supernatural horror, making it more than a ghost story. It's about a mother's love, her fear of failing, and a child's courage in facing the incomprehensible. Oliver's role as the canary in the coal mine is clearer now. His drawing's a bridge between the psychological and the supernatural, much like the kids in Poltergeist, who sense the house's malevolence before the adults do. As this section closes, Sarah sits at the kitchen table, Oliver asleep upstairs, his latest drawing crumpled in her hand. It shows a figure standing inside the house, its hollow eyes staring from a hallway mirror. The image sends a shiver through her, and she glances at the kitchen window, its blinds half open, reflecting the dark street beyond. For a moment, she thinks she sees a shadow flicker across the glass. Tall, thin, motionless. But when she blinks, it's gone. She pulls the blinds shut, her hands trembling, and checks the locks, telling herself it's just the stress of the move. But deep down, she knows something's watching, and it's not just outside. It's in the house, in the glass, in the spaces she can't see. And as the night stretches on, the silence feels like a promise of what she's too scared to imagine. The house on Maple Crescent is no longer a refuge for Sarah and Oliver. It's a labyrinth of shadows, where every corner holds a whisper of menace and every window feels like a betrayal. The air inside is thick with a damp chill, as if the walls are sweating fear, and the creaks of the hardwood floors have taken on a cadence, like footsteps that never quite reach their destination. Sarah's optimism, once a fragile shield against the neighborhood's oddities, is crumbling under the weight of what she can't ignore. Oliver's drawings, with their hollow-eyed figures, the old woman's stare, Mrs. Landry's warning to close the curtains, and that chilling night when a faceless silhouette loomed in the window across the street. She clings to routine, brewing coffee, folding Oliver's clothes, humming half-forgotten songs, to keep the panic at bay, but it's like shouting into a void. The house is watching, its windows glinting with a clarity that feels alive, and Sarah's denial is fraying, thread by thread, as the horror closes in. Oliver is slipping further into a world only he can see. His crayons are worn to nubs, his desk a graveyard of drawings that grow darker each day. Skeletal figures crowding windows, their hands smearing the glass. A single shadow looming in a doorway, its head tilted as if listening. A child's stick-figure body dwarfed by a faceless watcher, its fingers clawing at the air. He barely speaks now, his once sparkling eyes dulled by fear, and Mr. Flops, his stuffed bunny, is a constant companion, clutched so tightly its seams are splitting. Sarah finds him whispering to the toy late at night, his voice too low to catch, as if sharing secrets he can't tell her. His avoidance of windows has become a ritual. He ducks under sills, skirts mirrors, and refuses to enter the bathroom alone, where the small frosted window seems to draw his gaze like a magnet. "They're always there," he tells Sarah one morning, his voice flat but certain, pointing to a drawing of a figure pressing its face against a window, the glass warping under its touch. Sarah's heart twists, but she forces a smile, tucking the drawing away, promising to frame it later. She's lying to him, to herself, because the truth is too heavy. Oliver's not imagining this, and she's running out of ways to pretend he is. The story's horror intensifies through the house's growing malevolence. The creaks Sarah once dismissed as settling wood are now deliberate, a rhythmic pacing that stops just outside her bedroom door, leaving only silence when she checks. The tapping at the kitchen window, once sporadic, is now a nightly occurrence, a soft tap-tap-tap that mimics a heartbeat, always coming from a different window, as if something is circling the house. She pulls every curtain, every blind, but the fabric feels flimsy, like paper against a storm. One night, she wakes to a sound she can't place. A low, guttural hum, not quite human, vibrating through the walls. She lies still, breath shallow, listening as it fades, but the silence that follows is worse, a void that feels like it's waiting. The windows, once a promise of light and openness, are now threats, their reflections holding shadows that don't belong. A study I read in environmental psychology noted that humans feel vulnerable near windows at night, a primal fear of exposure to the unknown. In Maple Crescent, that fear is a living thing, the window's proximity to neighboring houses amplifying the sense that something is always watching, just beyond the glass. The story's use of reflections takes a terrifying turn in a moment that shatters Sarah's fragile denial. One evening, as she's tucking Oliver into bed, she finds him standing in the hallway, staring at a cheap mirror hung on the wall. A dollar store find she'd tacked up to make the house feel lived in. His small frame is rigid, Mr. Flops dangling from one hand, his eyes fixed on the glass. "There in the mirror now," he whispers, his voice trembling but certain. Sarah's pulse spikes, but she steps closer, forcing a calm she doesn't feel. "It's just us, Ollie," she says, peering into the mirror. The reflection shows only the hallway, dim and empty, her own face pale and strained. But as she looks, a flicker of movement catches her eye. A shadow, tall and thin, sliding across the glass behind her. She spins, heart hammering, but the hallway is empty, the silence deafening. Oliver's hand grips hers, his voice barely audible. "They don't like it when you look too long." Sarah yanks the mirror off the wall, its frame clattering to the floor, and carries Oliver to her room, locking the door. She tells herself it was a trick of the light, but her hands shake, and the mirror's blank surface haunts her, a portal she can't unsee. This mirror moment is a game-changer, a masterstroke of horror that elevates the story's dread. Mirrors and horror, think Candyman's bloody summonings or Oculus's cursed glass, are more than reflective surfaces. They're gateways to the unknown, showing not just reality but something else. The story's use of a cheap mirror is brilliant. Its mundanity, something you'd grab at a discount store, makes its transformation into a threat all the more jarring. The shadow's fleeting appearance, visible only in the glass, plays on our everyday paranoia. Those moments when you swear you saw something in a mirror's corner, a flicker that vanishes when you turn. It's like brushing your teeth and catching a glimpse of the shower curtain moving, your brain scrambling for an explanation while doubt festers. For Sarah, this moment is a crack in her reality, a confirmation that the danger isn't just outside but inside, woven into the fabric of her home. Sarah's paranoia spikes as the strange events pile up. The tapping at the windows grows louder, more insistent, coming from multiple directions. Kitchen, living room, even the small bathroom window, its frosted glass no longer a shield. She checks the locks obsessively, her fingers tracing the bolts as if they could hold back what's coming. The noises escalate. Footsteps in the hallway, too light to be human, pausing outside Oliver's room. A faint scratching at the front door, like nails testing the wood, and that guttural hum, now a nightly visitor, seeping through the walls like a pulse. Sarah tries to ground herself in routine, but every task feels fraught. Washing dishes, she catches a flicker of movement in the kitchen window's reflection. A shadow behind her, tall and blurred, gone when she turns. Her hands tremble so badly she drops a bottle of dish soap, its crash echoing in the silent house. She runs to check on Oliver, finding him curled in bed, Mr. Flops clutched tight, his eyes wide with a fear he can't name. "They're closer now," he whispers, and Sarah's chest tightens, her reassurances sounding hollow even to her. Desperate for answers, Sarah decides to confront the neighbors, hoping someone can explain the madness creeping into her life. She leaves Oliver watching cartoons, his small frame dwarfed by the couch, and crosses the street to a house where a young couple lives, their porch light flickering like a dying star. She knocks, her heart pounding, and the door opens to reveal a man in his 30s, his face pale, his eyes sunken as if he hasn't slept in days. His wife hovers behind him, her hands twisting a dish towel, her gaze darting to the windows. Sarah stammers out her question, asking if they've noticed anything strange at night. Tapping, shadows, anything. The man's expression shifts, a flicker of recognition crossing his face, and he leans in, his voice low and urgent. "They're watching you too, aren't they?" he says, his words a knife in Sarah's gut. Before she can press him, his wife pulls him back, whispering something sharp, and he slams the door, the sound reverberating down the street. Sarah stands frozen, her breath shallow, the man's words echoing in her mind. It's not just her imagination, not just Oliver's drawings. Whatever's haunting them is real, and the neighbors know it. This exchange is a chilling pivot, confirming Sarah's worst fears while deepening the mystery. The neighbors question, "They're watching you too, aren't they?" Is a gut punch, a moment where the story's ambiguity sharpens into certainty. It's like Rosemary's Baby, where the neighbors' oddities reveal a conspiracy, or The Invitation, where a polite facade hides a deadly truth. The couple's fear, their refusal to say more, suggests they're not just witnesses but prisoners, trapped in the same nightmare as Sarah and Oliver. This social horror, the idea that the community is complicit, or at least powerless, amplifies Sarah's isolation. She moved to Maple Crescent for connection, for safety, but now she's an outsider in a neighborhood that feels like a cult, its residents bound by a secret they won't share. I felt this kind of isolation moving to a new place, where neighbors' closed doors and curt nods made me feel like an intruder. For Sarah, it's worse. Her neighbor's silence isn't apathy. It's fear, and it leaves her nowhere to turn. The story's use of reflections is its most terrifying element here. Windows, mirrors, even the kitchen sink's chrome faucet. Every reflective surface is a potential threat, a window into a world where the shadows live. This isn't just a horror trope. It's a commentary on vulnerability, the way our homes expose us to the outside world. In a psychology class, I learned about the illusion of transparency, the feeling that others can see our thoughts, our fears, through our actions. In Maple Crescent, that illusion is literal, the reflections showing not just Sarah and Oliver but the things that watch them. The mirror scene, with its fleeting shadow, is particularly haunting, evoking Oculus's cursed mirror or Candyman's bloody ritual, but grounded in the mundane. A cheap frame, a hallway light. It's a reminder that horror doesn't need grandeur. Sometimes, a flicker in the glass is enough to unravel you. Sarah's growing paranoia mirrors our own real-world fears. Who hasn't done a double-take at a reflection, heart racing, only to laugh it off? But the doubt lingers, a seed that grows in the dark. Sarah's no longer laughing. She avoids mirrors, checks windows obsessively, and jumps at every sound, her world shrinking to the space between her and Oliver. The story's pacing is relentless now, each scare, tapping, footsteps, the mirror's shadow, building to a crescendo that leaves no room for denial. Oliver's role as the story's canary is clearer than ever, his whispers and drawings a beacon Sarah can't ignore. His fear is no longer a child's fancy. It's a truth she's too scared to face, but running out of time to escape. As this section closes, Sarah sits at the kitchen table, the house silent except for the faint hum that's become her nightly companion. Oliver is asleep, his latest drawing. A figure inside the house, its hands reaching for a child, crumpled in her fist. She glances at the kitchen window, its blinds shut but glowing faintly from the streetlight outside. For a split second, she thinks she sees a shadow flicker across the glass. Tall, thin, its head tilted as if listening. She blinks and it's gone, but her hands tremble, and she checks the locks again, her breath shallow. The house feels alive, its reflections holding secrets she can't unsee, and Sarah knows, deep down, that the shadows aren't just watching. They're closing in, and she's running out of places to hide. The house on Maple Crescent has become a prison, its walls closing in on Sarah and Oliver like a living thing. The air is thick with a damp, metallic tang, as if the house is bleeding fear, and the hardwood floors groan underfoot. There creaks a constant reminder that silence is a lie. Sarah's world has shrunk to a tightrope walk between terror and survival, her every move shadowed by the horrors that have piled up. Oliver's drawings, with their skeletal figures pressing against warped glass. The old woman's stare. Mrs. Landry's warning. The neighbor's chilling confirmation that they're watching you too. And the fleeting shadows in mirrors and windows, each one a crack in her reality. She stopped sleeping, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, her hands trembling as she checks locks and pulls curtains, trying to seal out the things that lurk just beyond the glass. But the house is against her, its reflections, windows, mirrors, even the polished kettle on the counter, glinting with a malevolence that feels personal. Sarah's denial, once a fragile shield, is gone, replaced by a raw, animal instinct to protect Oliver, the 5-year-old boy who's become the epicenter of this nightmare. Oliver is a ghost of himself, his once bright spirit buried under layers of fear. His drawings have consumed him, each one a darker prophecy. Figures crowding windows, their hollow eyes staring. A child's stick-figure body swallowed by a faceless shadow. A hallway mirror reflecting a twisted, elongated form. He no longer plays, no longer speaks unless prompted. His voice a whisper when it comes at all. Mr. Flops, his stuffed bunny, is his only constant, its fur matted from being clutched through sleepless nights. Oliver avoids all reflective surfaces, ducking under windowsills, sidestepping mirrors, and refusing to enter rooms alone. His room, once a sanctuary, is now a no-go zone. He insists on sleeping in Sarah's bed, curled against her, his small body trembling at every sound. They like it their best, he tells her one night, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, referring to his bedroom. They wait in the window. Sarah's heart breaks, but she can't argue. His drawings, his whispers, his fear are too real, too precise, to dismiss as imagination. She pulls him closer, promising safety she doesn't believe in, and listens to the house. It creaks and hums a chorus of dread. The horror has seeped into every corner of their lives. The tapping at the windows, once a nightly nuisance, is now a cacophony, a relentless tap-tap-tap that shifts from one window to another, as if the figures are testing every entry point. The footsteps in the hallway are bolder, no longer stopping at doors but circling, their rhythm too light, too erratic, to be human. The guttural hum that haunts Sarah's nights is louder, a low vibration that seems to come from the walls themselves, like the house is alive and speaking. Sarah's paranoia is a living thing. She checks windows obsessively, avoids mirrors, and jumps at every shadow, her world a maze of threats. Oliver's nightmares have worsened, his sleep broken by cries of "They're here" that jolt Sarah awake, her heart pounding as she scans the dark for something she can't see. His latest drawing, found crumpled under his pillow, shows a figure reaching through a window, its claw-like hand inches from a child's stick-figure body clutching a bunny. The image burns into Sarah's mind, a warning she can't ignore, and she starts keeping a kitchen knife under her pillow, its cold steel a flimsy comfort against the unknown. The story races toward its climax in a sequence that's pure nightmare fuel. One night, Sarah wakes to a stillness that's wrong, the house holding its breath in a way that makes her skin crawl. The clock reads 3:14 a.m., the witching hour, and the silence is suffocating, broken only by Oliver's soft whimper from beside her. She listens, every nerve on edge, and then it starts. A faint tapping, not from one window but from all of them. A synchronized drumbeat that fills the house. Tap, 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 slow at first, then faster, louder, coming from the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom, even Oliver's abandoned bedroom. It's not random. It's coordinated. A siege, and Sarah's heart hammers as she realizes the figures aren't just watching. They're trying to get in. Oliver clings to her, his small hands digging into her arm, his voice a terrified whisper. "They're inside, Mommy. They're here." She follows his gaze to the hallway mirror, visible through the open bedroom door, its cheap frame glinting in the moonlight. The glass is empty, reflecting only the dark hallway, but Sarah's breath catches. She swears she saw a flicker, a shadow sliding across the surface, too quick to be sure. The tension explodes in a heart-stopping moment. Sarah grabs a flashlight, its beam trembling in her hand, and creeps to the living room, Oliver pressed against her side. The tapping is deafening now, a relentless assault that shakes the windows in their frames, accompanied by a new sound, a low, guttural whisper, not quite human, weaving through the noise like a chant. It's not words, not language, but it carries intent, a hunger that makes Sarah's skin crawl. She steadies herself, gripping Oliver's hand, and pulls back the living room curtain, expecting, hoping, to see nothing. The flashlight beam cuts through the dark, illuminating the window, and Sarah stifles a scream. The glass reflects not the street but the room behind her, and in that reflection, A group of figures stands, tall, twisted, their limbs unnaturally long, their faces smudged voids with hollow eyes. They're behind her, inside the house, their hands pressed against the reflected glass, fingers splaying as if pushing through. Sarah spins, the flashlight sweeping the room, but it's empty, the air thick with silence. She turns back to the window, and the reflection is normal again, showing only the street, but her pulse races, her mind reeling. Oliver's voice is a sob. They're in the mirrors too. Sarah's panic surges, and she bolts to the hallway, Oliver stumbling behind her. The mirror on the wall is no longer empty. The figures are there, crowding the glass, their hollow eyes locked on her, their bodies pressing forward, the surface rippling like water. It's not a reflection. It's a window, a portal, and the figures are inches from breaking through. Sarah grabs a blanket from the couch and throws it over the mirror, the fabric muffling the whispers but not the tapping, which grows louder, more frantic, shaking the house like a heartbeat. She drags Oliver to the bathroom, the only room without a mirror, its small frosted window covered with a towel. They lock the door, Sarah sitting against it, Oliver curled in the bathtub, Mr. Flops clutched to his chest. The tapping follows them, now a thunderous rhythm, joined by the guttural chant, louder, closer, seeping through the walls. Sarah's flashlight beam dances across the room, catching the bathtub faucet, its chrome surface polished to a mirror-like shine. She freezes, her breath shallow, as the beam reveals a reflection. A faceless figure, its head tilted, its mouth twisting into a grotesque, lipless smile. The faucet's curve distorts the image, making it writhe, and Sarah drops the flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. This sequence is the story's crescendo, a masterclass in psychological and supernatural horror. The synchronized tapping, the whispers, the figures in the reflections. Each element strips away Sarah's control, leaving her raw and exposed. The use of reflections as portals is genius, turning the house's mundane surfaces into battlegrounds. Windows and mirrors aren't just glass. They're thresholds, barriers that the figures exploit, blurring the line between inside and outside, reality and nightmare. The story's sound design, tapping, whispers, the guttural hum, amplifies the dread, reminiscent of A Quiet Place, where sound is a weapon, or The Conjuring, where silence is a prelude to terror. The figures' stillness, their hollow eyes and twisted forms, evoke the uncanny, a fear of the almost human that's more terrifying than any monster. It's like the slender man, a faceless entity that exists to watch, or the weeping angels, frozen until you blink. The faucet's reflection, a mundane object turned sinister, is a stroke of brilliance, proving that horror doesn't need grandeur, just a glint of chrome to unravel you. Sarah's desperation is palpable, her every action driven by the need to protect Oliver. She's no longer a skeptic. She's a mother in survival mode, her love for her son, the only thing keeping her from collapse. Oliver's terror, his insistence that they're inside, is heartbreaking, a child's clarity cutting through the chaos. His role as the story's canary is at its peak, his fear a beacon that Sarah finally heeds. The bathroom scene, with its claustrophobic tension, is a microcosm of their ordeal. Trapped, surrounded, with nowhere to hide. The faucet's reflection is the final blow, a reminder that the figures are everywhere, in every reflective surface, and escape may be impossible. Psychologically, this plays on our fear of exposure, the sense that our homes, our sanctuaries, are never truly safe. A study I read on environmental psychology noted that reflective surfaces trigger unease because they reveal what's behind us, exposing us to the unknown. In Maple Crescent, that unease is literal, the reflections showing not just Sarah and Oliver but the things that hunt them. The neighbor's complicity, hinted at in previous sections, looms larger here. The couple's fear, Mrs. Landry's warning, the old woman's stare. They all suggest that Maple Crescent is a community bound by this horror, its residents either victims or accomplices. The synchronized tapping, coming from every window, feels like a collective assault, as if the neighborhood itself is conspiring against Sarah and Oliver. It's reminiscent of Get Out, where the community's polite facade hides a sinister agenda, or the Wicker Man, where the townsfolk's silence is a death sentence. Sarah's isolation is complete. She can't turn to the neighbors, can't trust the house, can't even trust her own eyes. The story's social horror, the fear of being an outsider in a place that should welcome you, is at its peak, making Sarah's fight feel all the more desperate. The pacing here is relentless, each moment piling on dread until it's suffocating. The tapping's escalation, the whisper's intrusion, the reflection's betrayal, all build to a climax that leaves no room for doubt. The figures are real, and they're not just watching anymore. Sarah's physical actions, pulling curtains, covering the mirror, locking the door, are futile against a threat that defies physical barriers, amplifying the horror's psychological weight. Oliver's presence grounds the scene, his fear a mirror for Sarah's, their bond the only light in the darkness. As viewers, we're trapped with them, our hearts pounding, our eyes darting to our own windows, wondering what's reflected in the glass. As this section closes, Sarah sits against the bathroom door, her body a shield for Oliver, who's trembling in the bathtub. The tapping has stopped, but the silence is worse, a void that feels like it's waiting. The flashlight lies forgotten on the floor, its beam extinguished, and the towel over the window shifts slightly, as if brushed by an unseen hand. Sarah's eyes lock on the faucet, its chrome surface dark now, but she can't shake the image of that twisted smile. The house is no longer theirs. It's a house of eyes, every reflection a door, and the figures are closer than ever. Sarah holds Oliver tight, whispering promises she knows are lies, and waits for the next sound, the next shadow, knowing that whatever's coming, it's already here. The bathroom in the house on Maple Crescent is a fortress under siege, its locked door a flimsy barrier against the horrors that have consumed Sarah and Oliver's lives. The air is heavy, laced with a metallic tang that stings the throat, and the silence following the relentless tapping feels like a predator holding its breath. Sarah sits against the door, her body a shield for Oliver, who's curled in the bathtub, clutching Mr. Flops, his stuffed bunny, as if it could ward off the faceless figures that haunt their reflections. The flashlight lies abandoned on the floor, its beam extinguished, and the towel over the frosted window sways faintly, as if brushed by an unseen hand. The faucet's chrome surface, moments ago reflecting a twisted, lipless smile, is dark now, but Sarah can't look at it, can't shake the image of those hollow eyes boring into her. The house is no longer theirs. It's a house of eyes, every window, mirror, and glinting surface a portal for the shadows that have stalked them since they arrived. The creaks, the whispers, the synchronized tapping, the figures in the glass. They've all led to this moment, where survival hangs on a razor's edge, and Sarah knows they can't stay. Her mind races, piecing together the fragments of their nightmare. Oliver's drawings, with their skeletal figures clawing at windows. The old woman's stare. Mrs. Landry's warning to close the curtains. The neighbor's terrified admission that they're watching you too. The mirror's shadow. The faucet's grotesque reflection. Denial is no longer an option. Sarah's a mother fighting for her son. Her fear overridden by a primal need to get Oliver out. To escape the house, the neighborhood, the reflections that have turned their sanctuary into a trap. Oliver's trembling voice breaks the silence, barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "They're still here, Mommy," he whispers, his eyes wide with a fear that's aged him beyond his 5 years. "They want us to stay." Sarah's chest tightens, but she forces a steadiness into her voice, stroking his hair. "We're leaving, Ollie. Right now. I won't let them touch you." Her words are a vow, a lifeline, but the house seems to hear, its walls vibrating with a low, guttural hum that's become their nightly tormentor. A sound that's not just sound but intent, hunger, presence. Sarah's plan is born of desperation. The car keys are in the kitchen, the sedan parked in the driveway, their only chance to outrun the shadows. But the kitchen means crossing the living room, past the bay window and the hallway mirror, both now portals for the figures. She grips the kitchen knife she's kept under her pillow, its blade a cold comfort against a threat that defies steel. She lifts Oliver from the bathtub, his small body trembling against hers. Mr. Flops dangling from his hand. "Stay close," she whispers, unlocking the bathroom door, the click deafening in the silence. The hallway is dark, the mirror covered with a blanket, but Sarah feels its pull, a magnet for her fear. She moves quickly, Oliver's sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The house is alive with menace. The creaks are louder, the hum deeper, and a faint scratching, like nails on glass, follows them from the windows. Sarah avoids looking at the glass, but her peripheral vision catches flickers, tall, twisted shapes sliding across the reflections, their hollow eyes tracking her every step. The living room is a gauntlet. The bay window looms, its curtains drawn but glowing with streetlight, the fabric trembling as if something is pressing against it. The tapping resumes, slow and deliberate, not from one window but all of them, a chorus that shakes the walls. Sarah's heart pounds, her grip on Oliver tightening as she skirts the window, her eyes fixed on the kitchen doorway. But Oliver stops, his small hand pulling at hers, his voice a terrified sob. "They're in the glass, Mommy." Sarah follows his gaze to the TV screen, its blank surface reflecting the room like a mirror. In the reflection, the figures are there, 3, maybe 4, their elongated limbs crowding the space behind Sarah and Oliver, their smudged faces tilting as if curious. Sarah spins, the flashlight sweeping the room, but it's empty, the air thick with a silence that feels like a scream. The reflection shifts, the figures stepping closer, their hands reaching, fingers clawing at the glass as if it's a membrane they can tear through. Sarah grabs Oliver, bolting for the kitchen, the tapping escalating to a thunderous rhythm, the hum now a growl that vibrates in her bones. The kitchen is a battlefield of reflections. The window above the sink, the chrome toaster, the polished kettle, all glinting with malice. Sarah snatches the keys from the counter, her hands shaking so badly she nearly drops them. The window's blinds are shut, but a shadow flickers across the slats, tall and thin, its head tilted as if listening. Oliver's cry pierces the air. "They're coming!" And Sarah turns to see the kettle's surface reflecting not the kitchen but a void, a dark expanse where a figure stands, its lipless mouth twisting into a smile. She yanks Oliver toward the back door, fumbling with the lock, the scratching now a deafening screech, as if the figures are clawing through the glass. The door swings open, the night air cold and sharp, and Sarah runs, Oliver stumbling beside her. The sedan just steps away. She glances back, and the kitchen window is alive. Figures crowding the glass, their hands smearing the surface, their hollow eyes locked on her. The hum is a roar now, filling the night, and Sarah feels it in her chest, a pull urging her to look back, to meet their gaze. She shoves Oliver into the back seat, slamming the door and diving into the driver's seat. The key jams in the ignition, her hands slick with sweat, and for a terrifying moment, the engine sputters, refusing to turn over. The tapping surrounds the car, coming from every window, and Sarah risks a glance at the side mirror. The reflection shows not the driveway but the figures, standing on the lawn, their bodies twisting as if unhinged, their faces voids that seem to drink the light. Oliver's scream, "Don't look, Mommy," snaps her focus, and she twists the key again, the engine roaring to life. She floors the gas, the sedan lurching forward, tires screeching as they peel out of Maple Crescent. The tapping fades, the hum recedes, but Sarah's heart doesn't slow, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror, expecting to see those hollow eyes staring back. The road stretches dark and empty, the neighborhood's identical houses blurring into a nightmare she can't unsee. They drive for hours, Sarah's knuckles white on the steering wheel, Oliver curled in the back seat, Mr. Flops clutched tight. She doesn't know where they're going, away, anywhere, as far from Maple Crescent as the sedan's dwindling gas tank will take them. The night is a void, the highway lights casting fleeting shadows that make her flinch, every glint a reminder of the reflections they left behind. She stops at a gas station at dawn, the sky bruised with purple, and checks on Oliver, who's asleep, his face pale but peaceful for the first time in weeks. She buys a coffee, its bitterness grounding her, and stands outside, watching the horizon, trying to believe they're safe. But when she glances at the sedan's window, she freezes. A faint smudge, like a handprint, marks the glass, too large to be Oliver's, too deliberate to be accidental. She wipes it away, her hands trembling, and tells herself it's nothing. But the doubt lingers, a scar that won't fade. The escape is not a triumph. It's a survival, raw and incomplete. Sarah and Oliver are free of Maple Crescent, but the shadows have left their mark. They find a cheap motel, its flickering neon sign a far cry from the neighborhood's manicured lawns, and Sarah spends the first night checking windows, taping blankets over the bathroom mirror, her knife never far from reach. Oliver draws again, but his sketches are different now. Simple trees, a sun, a house without windows, as if he's trying to erase the figures from his mind. Yet he still whispers to Mr. Flops, his voice too low for Sarah to hear, and he avoids reflective surfaces, his eyes darting to corners where shadows pool. Sarah watches him, her heart aching with guilt. She brought him to Maple Crescent, promised him safety, and delivered a nightmare. She vows to protect him, to rebuild their lives. But the fear remains, a weight she carries in every glance at a window, every flicker in a mirror. This climax is a masterclass in horror, blending psychological dread with supernatural terror. The escape is visceral every moment. Tapping, scratching, reflections, piling on panic until it's suffocating. The figure's pursuit, their ability to invade reflections, turns the house into a labyrinth of eyes, a concept that's both innovative and primal. It's like It Follows, where the threat is relentless, inescapable, or paranormal activity, where the home itself betrays you. The reflections' role as portals is chilling, transforming mundane objects, the TV, the kettle, the car mirror, into gateways for the uncanny. The figure's hollow eyes, their twisted forms, evoke the slender man or the Babadook's shadowy presence. But their stillness, their hunger to be seen, is uniquely terrifying. The sound design, tapping, hum, screeching, amplifies the dread, creating a sensory assault that mirrors Sarah's mental state. Sarah's transformation is the emotional core. She's no longer the hopeful mother clinging to denial. She's a warrior, her love for Oliver driving every desperate act. Her physicality, running, fumbling with keys, shielding Oliver, grounds the supernatural in human stakes, making her relatable, heroic, flawed. Oliver's role as the story's canary reaches its peak. His warnings, "They're coming. Don't look," guiding Sarah through the chaos. His trauma, etched in his drawings and whispers, is heartbreaking, a reminder that children bear the scars of horror most deeply. The neighbor's absence in this section is telling. Their complicity, hinted at through warnings and fear, leaves Sarah and Oliver alone. The community's silence a final betrayal. It's a social horror akin to Rosemary's Baby, where the neighbor's inaction is as damning as the threat itself. Psychologically, the escape taps into our fear of vulnerability, the sense that our homes, our reflections, expose us to the unknown. A study I read on environmental psychology noted that reflective surfaces trigger unease because they reveal what's behind us, a vestige of our ancestral fear of predators. In Maple Crescent, that fear is literal, the reflections showing not just reality but the things that hunt it. The smudged handprint on the car window is a gut punch, a reminder that the figure's reach may extend beyond the neighborhood, a trope used in The Ring, where the horror follows you home. The ambiguous ending, freedom, but at a cost, avoids a tidy resolution, leaving Sarah and Oliver scarred, their future uncertain. It's a hallmark, where survival is never clean, and the horror lingers in the spaces you can't see. As this section closes, Sarah sits in the motel room, Oliver asleep beside her, his breathing soft but uneven. The knife rests on the nightstand, the blankets taped over the mirror casting odd shadows in the dim light. She glances at the window, its curtains drawn, and for a moment, she thinks she hears a faint tap-tap-tap, so soft it could be her imagination. She freezes, breath held, but the sound doesn't return, and the silence feels like a promise of what she's too scared to name. They've escaped Maple Crescent, but the shadows are patient, And Sarah knows, deep down, that some doors, once opened, never fully close. The shadow at the window lingers like a shadow in the corner of your eye, its horror seeping into the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. The story of Sarah and Oliver, a mother and son fleeing faceless figures that stalk them through reflections, is more than a viral tale. It's a mirror for our deepest fears, a nightmare that feels personal because it's built on truths we all recognize. From the deceptively idyllic Maple Crescent to the relentless tapping, the cryptic neighbors, Oliver's chilling drawings, and the climactic escape, the story weaves a tapestry of dread that doesn't fade when you close the tab. It's the kind of horror that makes you hesitate before passing a mirror, double-check your curtains, or glance at a window after dark, wondering if something's staring back. So why does this story haunt us? Why does it stick, burrowing into our minds like a splinter? Let's unpack its genius, from its psychological roots to its cultural resonance, and explore what it teaches us about fear, survival, and the shadows we can't outrun. At its core, the story's power lies in its psychological horror, a slow-burn dread that exploits our primal instincts. Sarah and Oliver's ordeal taps into universal fears, the terror of being watched, the fragility of home as a sanctuary, and the gut-wrenching drive to protect a loved one from an incomprehensible threat. The faceless figures, with their hollow eyes and unnatural stillness, are the embodiment of the uncanny, that eerie space where something is almost human but not quite, triggering a visceral unease. A study I read in cognitive psychology describes the uncanny valley, where near-human entities like robots or, in this case, shadowy silhouettes, provoke discomfort because they defy our expectations of life. The figures' lack of faces, their silent observation through windows and mirrors, forces us to project our worst fears onto them, making them as personal as our own nightmares. For Sarah, they're a manifestation of her guilt and failure, her broken marriage, her inability to shield Oliver. While for us, they're the unknown, the things we sense but can't name, lurking just beyond the glass. The story's use of reflections is its most innovative and terrifying element. Windows, mirrors, even mundane surfaces like a faucet or a TV screen are transformed into portals, thresholds where the figures can watch, wait, and invade. This isn't just a clever twist. It's a commentary on vulnerability, the way our homes expose us to the outside world. In everyday life, windows are symbols of openness, letting in light and connecting us to the community. But at night, they become threats, thin barriers against the dark. A study on environmental psychology notes that humans feel exposed near windows after dark, a primal fear tied to our ancestors' dread of predators. In Maple Crescent, this fear is literal, every reflective surface a potential doorway for the figures. The story's genius is in its mundanity, a cheap mirror, a kitchen sink's chrome, turning the familiar into the sinister, much like Oculus's cursed mirror or Candyman's bloody summonings. It's a reminder that horror doesn't need grandeur. Sometimes, a flicker in the glass is enough to unravel you. Sarah and Oliver's emotional journey grounds the supernatural in human stakes, making the horror resonate on a personal level. Sarah is every parent who's ever felt the weight of failure. Her move to Maple Crescent, a desperate bid to rebuild after a divorce that left her drained and Oliver scarred. Her arc, from hopeful denial to paranoid survival to desperate warrior, is relatable. Her love for her son, the engine driving every choice, even when it blinds her to the truth. Her guilt, especially after the escape, is palpable. She promised Oliver safety and delivered a nightmare, and that wound lingers in the motel room, where she tapes blankets over mirrors and keeps a knife close. Oliver, the story's heartbeat, is a study in trauma's toll on a child. His drawings, his whispers to Mr. Flops, his avoidance of reflections. They're not just plot devices but a child's attempt to process a world that's betrayed him. His role as the canary in the coal mine, sensing the figures before Sarah, echoes horror classics like The Shining's Danny or Poltergeist's Carol but his quiet courage, his trust in Sarah despite the terror, makes him uniquely heartbreaking. The social horror of Maple Crescent adds another layer of dread. The neighbors, Mrs. Landry, the old woman, the terrified couple, are a community bound by fear, their cryptic warnings and slammed doors a betrayal of the connection Sarah sought. This taps into the fear of being an outsider, a universal anxiety amplified by Sarah's vulnerability as a single mother in a new place. I felt this moving to a new city, where neighbors' curt nods and closed doors made me feel like an intruder. But for Sarah, it's worse. Their silence is complicity, their fear a confirmation that the figures are real and inescapable. It's reminiscent of Rosemary's Baby, where the neighbor's polite facade hides a conspiracy, or Get Out, where the community's warmth is a trap. Maple Crescent's residents aren't villains, but their inaction, born of fear or resignation, makes them part of the nightmare, leaving Sarah and Oliver to face the shadows alone. The story's cultural context, hinted at in its Vietnamese title, Bong Nuoi Ben Qua So, roughly the shadow at the window, adds depth to its horror. In Vietnamese folklore, shadows and reflections often carry spiritual weight, tied to ancestors, spirits, or malevolent entities that linger at thresholds like windows or mirrors. While the story doesn't explicitly lean into this, the title evokes a cultural fear of the liminal, the spaces between worlds where the living and the other meet. This resonates globally. Many cultures have tales of entities that watch from reflections, like Japan's Yurei or Latin America's La Llorona, who haunt the edges of perception. The figure's facelessness, their obsession with glass, feels like a modern twist on these myths, making the story both universal and culturally specific. It's a nod to the r/no-sleep community's global reach, where stories draw from diverse traditions to craft horrors that transcend borders. Why does the story stick with us? It's the ambiguity, the way it refuses to explain the figure's origins or motives. Are they ghosts, demons, manifestations of trauma? The lack of answers is deliberate, a hallmark that lets our imaginations fill the gaps. This mirrors the haunting of Hill House, where the house's malevolence is never fully defined, or It Follows, where the entity's rules are clear but its purpose opaque. The figure's hunger to be seen, their need for Sarah and Oliver to look, is what makes them so unsettling. It's a power dynamic, a predator's game where attention is the trap. The escape, with its smudged handprint and faint tapping, leaves us questioning whether they're truly free. A gut punch that lingers like the Ring's cursed tape, where the horror follows you home. This ambiguity taps into our fear of the unresolved, the sense that some threats can't be outrun, only endured. The story also reflects modern anxieties, particularly the fear of surveillance. In an era of Ring cameras, social media, and constant connectivity, the idea of being watched by neighbors, strangers, or something else feels all too real. The figure's use of reflections feels like a metaphor for this, their hollow eyes a stand-in for the unseen gazes that track our lives. Sarah's paranoia, her obsessive checking of locks and windows, mirrors our own hypervigilance in a world where privacy is a myth. Psychologists call this the illusion of transparency, the feeling that our thoughts and fears are exposed to others. In Maple Crescent, that illusion is literal, the reflections showing not just Sarah and Oliver but the things that hunt them. The story's setting, a suburban neighborhood promising safety, amplifies this, subverting the American dream much like Poltergeist or Stranger Things, where the idyllic hides the horrific. The real-life stories shared earlier, tapping windows, smudged handprints, children's eerie drawings, prove the story's resonance, showing how its fears echo our own experiences. When I posted on X about feeling watched in a new home, the responses were chilling, from @Nidal92's shadow in Ohio to Maria's daughter's tall man. These accounts aren't just anecdotes. They're evidence that the fear of unseen watchers, of homes turned hostile, is universal. Sarah and Oliver's trauma, their desperate escape, feels like ours because we've all felt that prickle of unease, that moment when a creak or a flicker makes us question what's out there. The story externalizes these fears, giving them form in the figures, but it's their human cost, the scars on a mother and son, that makes it unforgettable. What does The Shadow at the Window teach us? It's a story about facing the unknown, about the strength it takes to survive when the world betrays you. Sarah's fight, her refusal to let the figures take Oliver, is a testament to love's power, even when it's battered by guilt and fear. Oliver's courage, his quiet insistence on the truth, reminds us that children often see what adults ignore, their clarity a guide through the dark. The story's lesson isn't about defeating the shadows. Some threats can't be killed, only escaped, but about carrying the scars forward, rebuilding from the ashes. Sarah and Oliver's motel room, with its taped mirrors and restless nights, is a new beginning, but not a clean one. It's a mirror for our own lives, where traumas linger, but survival is a victory, however small. The story's place in horror is secure, standing alongside classics like The Babadook, where grief becomes a monster, or pen pal, where a child's innocence unveils a nightmare. Its innovation, reflections as portals, a neighborhood as a conspirator, sets it apart, while its emotional depth makes it universal. It's a gem, a tale that captures the platform's knack for blending the personal with the supernatural. For newcomers, it's a gateway to horror's power, a reminder that the scariest stories are the ones that feel like they could happen to you. As we close this deep dive, I'm left with a question. What's the shadow in your window? What fear lingers in your reflections, waiting for you to look? The shadow at the window doesn't just scare us. It shows us, in every glint of glass, the shadows we carry and the strength it takes to face them. And there it is, the shadow at the window, a story that starts with a tap at the window and ends with a mother and son running from shadows that may never let them go. Sarah and Oliver's nightmare in Maple Crescent, with its watchful figures, cryptic neighbors, and reflections that hide monsters, is the kind of horror that doesn't just scare you, it changes you. It's been days since I dove into this gem, and I still catch myself glancing at mirrors, hesitating at windows, wondering what's staring back. That's the power of this tale. It takes the everyday, glass, silence, a new home, and turns it into a battlefield, where fear is as close as your own reflection. We've followed Sarah's fight to save Oliver, from her fragile hope to her desperate escape, and we've seen Oliver's courage, his drawings a cry against the dark. We've heard real-life stories that echo their terror, proving this isn't just fiction. It's a mirror for the fears we all carry. Why does it haunt us? It's the way it taps into primal dread, being watched, losing safety, failing those we love. The figures with their hollow eyes aren't just monsters. There are doubts, our traumas, the shadows we can't outrun. The story's reflections, windows, mirrors, a glinting faucet, are portals to that truth, showing us what we'd rather ignore. Sarah's guilt, Oliver's trauma, the neighbor's silence. They're not just plot points. They're us, fighting to survive in a world that's never as safe as it seems. The ambiguous ending, with that smudged handprint and faint tap, leaves us uneasy, a reminder that some fears follow you, no matter how far you run. So what's the takeaway? The shadow at the window isn't about defeating the shadows. It's about facing them. Sarah's strength, her refusal to let Oliver go, shows us that love can carry you through the dark, even when it leaves scars. Oliver's drawings, his quiet truth, remind us to listen to our instincts, to see what's hiding in plain sight. This story dares us to look at our own reflections, to confront the fears we bury. Whether it's failure, loss, or the unknown, it's a call to be brave, to hold tight to what matters, and to keep running, even when the shadows are close. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into a nightmare that's as beautiful as it is terrifying. If this story hit you as hard as it hit me, drop a comment on X. Share your own shadow, your own window story. Hit subscribe for more horror breakdowns that cut deep, and maybe check your curtains tonight. Because in the world of Shadow by the Window, the shadows are always watching, and they're closer than you think. If you enjoyed tonight's chilling tale, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps summon more spooky stories for you. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a night at the edge of fear. And tell me in the comments. Until next time, sleep tight, if you can.